best kind of games stay with you many days, weeks and even months after you finish them, and Spec Ops: The Line does just that. The last game that made me think this hard about human emotion and trauma was The Last of Us Part 2. Now, I'm not going to get into whether that game was good, bad or whatever in this video, but what I am going to say is that it had a very similar impact to me as a player. After I'd finished it, it made me think and question what I would do in a similar situation and how humans are, well, just that. We're humans. When something happens to us that is emotionally distressing, it can be hard to deal with and people react in different ways. What's remarkable is that video games give us the chance to experience intense and distressing moments in a fictional person's life without passing on that emotion and stress to us. And I think that's why games like Spec Ops: The Line are so memorable, because we understand what someone is going through and empathise with them, as we have, in a way, lived through the experience with them. So before I start this review, I just want to give a spoiler warning. If you haven't played this game, go away, play it, save this video to your watch list and come back later. I just want to say that if you disagree with anything I say in this review, please leave a comment and we can discuss it further, as I am acutely aware of this, that this game has different interpretations and theories. However, my thoughts are going to be based on my own perspective, as I said, and the comments of the producers. So I'll start with the story. Now, I think if I was to explain this game to someone who hadn't played it, I would say imagine the story-driven experience of The Last of Us with the linear elements that are put in place for the purpose of the story, and then combine that with Ghost Recon style type gameplay, but in a very basic sense. I'm not saying the gameplay in Spec Ops: The Line is as good or as either of those games, but that's how I would try and sell it. Now, I bring up The Last of Us because I saw a lot of similarities when playing this game. For example, you play as someone who goes on what looks like a very basic journey, which slowly gets less straightforward as the game progresses, with deeper themes hidden beneath the surface of what first appears to be basic third-person action-adventure game. These deeper themes are best explored with the mortar attack section of Spec Ops. Now, this moment in the game is eye-opening, to say the least, as you question the decision to use this destructive device, as your knowledge as the player does not know if there are civilians with the soldiers. Personally, I didn't question it at all, and at the time I didn't even know what white phosphorus grenades were. But for anyone watching and who doesn't know what white phosphorus is, it is a highly flammable chemical component which has the ability to burn up all the oxygen in an area and suffocate anyone who is exposed to it. I guess in a more graphical sense, you could describe it as, or think of it as, something that sets you alight and puts you on fire. But the problem is you can't put the fire out, and on top of burning alive, you also can't breathe. However, back to the theme. So once this is done, it turns out that it's basically the most important part of the game, and it's not something I even realised when playing, and that's what's so powerful about it. You quite happily fire this horrible toxic chemical onto soldiers because they shot at you, without taking a minute to think about the repercussions of your actions and the potential collateral damage that could be caused. It's also important because it is the moment and reason Walker goes into denial. It's the moment that is responsible for his descent into chaos, and ultimately why he experiences PTSD and psychosis. If you don't know what those two things mean, I will explain in a very brief way, as I'm not a psychologist, so I don't want to misrepresent anyone who actually suffers from these two disorders in real life. I'll start with PTSD, or more commonly known as post-traumatic stress disorder. So, PTSD is a stress disorder caused by traumatic experience. Symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder includes flashbacks, nightmares, feeling very anxious and difficulty sleeping. Psychosis, on the other hand, is a condition that affects the way your brain processes information and causes you to lose touch with reality. You might see, hear or believe things aren't real, and psychosis can be caused by substance abuse, extreme stress or trauma. So, as I was saying, this moment that causes Walker to make more questionable decisions, as he can't face the fact that he may actually be the bad guy in this situation. And the tragedy comes when you realise he was sent to be the hero of the mission and ends up becoming the villain because of his choices. This is further reflected as the game progresses, as your squad start to become hostile towards you because of what you've done and made them partake in. There are frequent arguments, and it really hammers home what it's like to be in a high-stakes situation. In other words, it shows you how any sort of war can have devastating effects on human life. And I'm not just talking about or referencing the physical effects to the men, children and women that Walker kills, I'm talking about the mental effects it can have as well. When you pull back the curtain, this game is really about soldiers struggling with PTSD and psychosis and how this can create a person who they themselves never thought they could become.
That hotel back at the storm wall? No, those can't be the civvies that got kidnapped. It's not possible.
Now, I want to move on to the helicopter crash, as it's more important than it first appears, and is another really important aspect of understanding this game. Now, I will admit that I knew something fishy was going on throughout the game, as I didn't agree with the decisions that Walker was making, and I think that's the key to this game. You're meant to question it. But I didn't expect what was to come. To be honest, I didn't really know what to expect by the time I got to the end, but I did know that Walker's behaviour wasn't normal. This then leads to the scene where Walker says,
"Wait, this isn't right! It's too late now! No, I mean, we did this already!"
And I think this is a moment that is meant to be the oh snap moment for the player. But the producers of the game are very, very clever and carry on with the story like he survived to subvert player expectations. The reason I want to talk about this part, though, is because there are a lot of theories about what happens after this moment. My interpretation of what happens is that everything leading up to the helicopter crash is real in some form. Not all of it, because there are obvious bits in there that are hallucinations that act as a way to show Walker in a more positive light, or at least to show that he's had to make hard decisions throughout his time in Dubai. So, everything leading up to the crash is real and happened, but you have to remember that the first time playing for you as the player is the second time for Walker. That's why things change as he tries to fight his PTSD and become the hero of his own story. However, everything he did literally comes back to haunt him. Remember I said this gameplay moment is more important than it seems? Well, I said that because this is basically the start of his descent into hell. He's living his own hell and cannot escape as he is slowly dying whilst thinking about what he has done. This theme of hell comes after the helicopter has crashed, and it's visually displayed in front of you as you get up. There is a moment later on in the game where the Colonel also hints at this when he says, "Welcome to hell." Therefore, everything after the crash is not real, and is almost like Walker's life has flashed before his eyes before he dies, and depending on what ending you pick determines his internal fate. However, if you pick the ending I did, slightly by accident I must admit, you find that this is the only ending that is met with a fade to white as opposed to a fade to black. Now, the producers of this game have basically already said that everything in this game where it's fade to white is not real, everything fade to black happened. So, basically the fade to white for me represents Walker telling himself before he dies that he is the hero of the story and he did everything that he could. It's not his fault, it is the 33rd's, and basically by telling himself this, he dies a hero. Obviously, we never really know if the 33rd did shoot at his operatives first, but what we do know is that this happens from his perspective. We never find out if the 31st shot, or if they really did shoot first. I guess that's left up to the player to decide, and is meant to be ambiguous. So before I finish this review, I just want to move on to gameplay. Like I mentioned before, on the surface, Spec Ops: The Line seems like a generic third-person shooter that you've seen 1,000 of times. The plot seems very basic in that you have to rescue civilians from the storm and then radio for evacuation, but on the other hand of that is the gameplay. Now once you land in Dubai, you are given a tutorial of how to play the game, and it comes across as very generic and basic, but as the game goes on you start to see a unique side to the gameplay. But before I get into that, I just wanted to say that I actually don't mind the third-person shooter elements of this game. I have some issues with the cover system, but I'll circle back to that later on. For me, the shooting mechanics felt good enough. It's not, it's got like enough weight, and it feels, I guess, as realistic as it can in a video game. What I mean by that is when you shoot someone, they fall down quite quickly because, you know, they've been shot, and if you shoot them in the head, it's a one-hit kill, which, you know, for me is very realistic. The range of machine guns and pistols can be questionable at times, as you can literally shoot with the accuracy of a sniper, but the amount of ammo that is given does kind of even this out somewhat, as you have to be quite resourceful with how you use your ammo. They also, another really good thing in this game is that they also include environmental objects that you can destroy, and they can be used to your advantage. For example, there were windows you could shoot, and basically this would send pouring sand through, which would then basically wash away all your enemies, and it was just a really kind of satisfying way of moving through the objectives. It also broke up the game a bit more, as I felt that if they didn't have these elements, the game would have got quite stale and repetitive quite quickly, because there's not much to learn, if that makes sense. There's not a load of buttons, there's not much to kind of do, you just kind of move from point to point and kill enemies. So earlier as well I mentioned that the cover system for me was really annoying aspect of the game, as the character at times would not lock on properly to the area and would move around at annoying points when trying to aim. What I mean by this is that I would try to adjust myself to be in a better position so I get better aim, and would end up out of cover for whatever reason. But there is plenty that makes up for this. For example, when playing you can decide between full-on action or more reserved approach. There's not really a stealth option in the game, which I think would have elevated this, or at least my experience, to the next level. But I digress. The interesting thing about the two styles, however, is the fact that both of them require you to be tactical. For example, if you choose to run through enemies, then you'll have to decide how and when you're going to use your grenade and how best to utilise them. One example I can give is the fact that the grenades can be used to blind the enemies with the sand, which gives you a chance to run to the next guy and kind of move on to the next point. You can also use melee attacks to help with this, but again, it's very basic and it did not feel satisfying at all, so I normally avoided using it. I went for a more methodical approach where I waited and planned out what I was going to do, and I used RB to use my comrades to shoot for me, which was, again, a really good feature as it pits your NPCs, good use. I haven't really got more to discuss on the gameplay side because, like I said, it is quite basic. And for me, you don't play this game for the gameplay, you play it for the story and the experience, and you kind of let the producers have one for the gameplay, because they more than make up for it with the story. But yeah, that is the end. If you like this video, please like, subscribe and share, and I will see you next time.
No matter how hard I tried, I never could escape the reality of what happened here. That was my downfall.